Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Lowman02 again. Didn't expect to do another recording this evening, but actually had the opportunity to play against dawts in some really interesting and good games that we had. So in this series of matchups, I'm on Death and Taxes, which is a deck that I've shown you guys a couple times. Dawts is on 4-color Blood, which is essentially an aggressive version of like the 4-color mid-range value decks. His is pretty heavy with planeswalkers. So just a few notes about the matchup. I don't think either of us knew what either player was coming in with. If I had known he was on 4-color Blood, I probably wouldn't have brought Death and Taxes. I don't think it's a per se a favored matchup. But I think with proper building and play, an assessment of the game state, and really what it comes down to, and really I think we'll highlight it in the third match, is understanding of when you're on an aggressive deck, when the decision comes that you actually are the control. And we'll really highlight that in game three. So let's go into the games real fast. We have a very solid keep for Death and Taxes. So let's go over the keep. We have a Caracas Wasteland. Caracas is going to allow us on our turn one, which we are on the draw, which actually favors this hand very strongly. We'll be able to play land tax, which in my mind is going to hold him to one land unless he wants me to accrue vast value. Core Skyfisher is a card that's specifically put in here, as well as like Mox Diamond, a couple other cards that allow me to bounce a land back to my hand. In a lot of ways, I kind of treat Core Skyfisher as gush with a body attached to it. It's actually a very efficient body. Um, so what I'm looking to do is just accrue value through land tax, and then eventually get to my larger threats. I have a decent mid-game play in Thalia Heretic Cathar, Council's Lieutenant, solid gross style beater. It's just that's more of a white weenie card, but it's fine. I'm kind of planning on doing that probably turn three because I'll be behind on a drop due to playing tax out. And then Brave the Elements, depending on what he's playing, and if I'd known, I wouldn't have thought it was as good because he has some variation to what his creatures, what colors his creatures are. But typically speaking, most 4 or 5 color decks are base green. So even then, like Brave is fine. Brave the Elements is fine. So we go ahead and keep this hand. We see him play on a Marsh Flats, do nothing, pass it. We play on our tax. He gets a Scrubland Thought Seizes, which means I assume he probably drew that. I don't know. He may have just held it to see what I was on. We play out the Weather Wayfarer because, we can. We see a Bitter Blossom, which means, hey, we can't wait around forever on the land tax. We got to get to work. The cool thing is our first strikers are just great against Bitter Blossom. And in this matchup, really, I look at Bitter Blossom, and it's kind of like a black force field. I don't know if you're familiar with the card force field. It was in the original run of Magic the Gathering, and it basically says you choose a target creature that wasn't blocked this turn. It only deals 1 damage to you. And Bitter Blossom is essentially black force field in this match because really of all our first strikers, see a Liliana come out here, and we end up sacking our Student of War. Aside from kind of what I feel is like a general greediness of decks like this, you can see that tapping the mana is also a pain in the butt. So I believe, yeah, we got Vindicated. Now it's kind of interesting to me in his choice here. He chooses the Council's Lieutenant. I'd have to go back and check to see if we had the Precinct Captain on board, which may have made that a more viable option. I don't think we did, but I could be wrong on that. I think that Thalia is a much stronger card. Any land he plays, because I don't know if he runs basics in this deck. If he does, he likely runs a forest. Maybe a swamp as well, but probably a forest. Because you see cards like Findhorn Elves, and as you'll see throughout the match, you see like Sylvan Caryatid, I'm sure there's a Green Sun Zenith in there. There's a Lotus Cobra, stuff like that. The Avacyn's Pilgrim. So there's a lot of like 1 mana cards that require green, and they help him fix. Green is, obviously a strong base color because green by nature, tends to, no pun intended, but it tends to fix your colors in a deck like this. But my assumption is that anything he pulls off the top as far as lands go are going to come into play tapped, or it's going to be like 2 turns down the road untapped because it's fetch land. Liliana is pretty anemic here. It gets a Stud of War, which is a decent card because it's first striker, which just tends to beat Fairy Rogues. But I think he ends up packing it in here. We do not end up putting the Brimaz down. If he wants to make us discard it, we will. I want the availability to flip the Thalia back to my hand. And yeah, that's the end of the game. Never mind, I should even stop there. So the first round we take pretty pretty easily in this one. We just had a very aggressive start, and you know, while we never got to tax, and it kind of was a detriment to our tempo. I think we made the right call in upping the rheostat towards aggression when we saw the Bitter Blossom, because that card tends to mean you need to threaten them. Because if he's forced to block with his token every turn, all like I said, it becomes a black force field, which is fine by me. It's just I do a little less damage. Okay, so game 2. This is a game I did not think I was losing, up to a point. I'll show you where that point's at. So we have to mull the first one. It's a 2-lander with a Mox Diamond and not much action. It's got some removal, though. This, again, is a tax game. He stays on 1, which I'm happy to see because I have an Isamaru. I don't need to play a land. I'll just play an Isamaru out, and we can hang out and just chip at each other all day. We get to tax turn 2, or turn 3, I'm sorry. I believe we play out our 8.5 tails. It's just a good setup play. If the thing survives a turn, it can just, you know, it's essentially a Mother of Ruins with a recurring ability, if you have the mana for it. We get to tax again, so we're taxing, and we're just ripping lands out of the deck left and right. Unfortunately, we're not drawing threats. Rashad and Bortwell, it's a good card. I think it's fair against this matchup. It's not the best because this is a deck, the deck the opponent's playing, 4-color blood, is a deck that presents a decent number of threats. Here's where I think the game comes unhinged. We knew about his Swords to Plowshares, and we kind of planned on him Swords to Plowsharing the Silver Blade. We really wanted Brimaz to stick around. When we see Chandra, it's just a huge beating. We throw Isamaru in there because his ability to really impact the game is over. I'd rather trade as opposed to him to get some random value just to kill it, you know. So I'll trade for the Eternal Witness. It's fine. We play on Brimaz. We play out Gideon's Lawkeeper. Both of them get destroyed. Well, exiled and destroyed. At this point, I believe we end up playing out the Stonehewer because we know we're significantly behind. We see 2 Planeswalkers. Like, that's a lot of value that the opponent's getting, even though they're down on cards. They had a very, very strong draw. You know, and it's possible here. You know, honestly, I may have misplayed that. It may have been better to nail a Johnny. I don't know. I wanted to keep him off some of his mana. I didn't want to see like Inferno Titan or something. I don't know, though. A Johnny may have been a better play. Obviously, we didn't fetch for the equipment because we tapped too low. And I didn't want my Stonehewer tapped at that point in time because a Johnny will just keep him tapped. This is the beat. This right here, I know I'm probably going to lose. If I don't hit with this and get the untap, I'm pretty sure I'm done. Because I really needed the sword on the Boros Reckoner. I put him on removal, and I figured, hey, he's just going to remove it, but the equipment will already be in, and, you know, it's going to be, you know, better than that. Abrupt Decay is just a huge time beating. I end up exiling my own Stonehewer because it's never going to untap in this game, and I'd rather just have the cards. All I'm doing is drawing lands, even though we've taxed the heck out of the deck. And, you know, from here it's pretty elementary. We lose the game pretty handily. He's got a bigger team, and really we can't come back from this. Like, I can't think, you know, if maybe we ended up taking it out. This is a matchup where I definitely would play Tragic Arrogance, because I think it's a very good one here, because this is a deck that plays the Mana Dorks, but at the same time, also plays like a decent number of mid-range threats. Right here would be great because he's still going to have a Garruk in play, but I mean, if I leave him with Llanowar Elves plus Garruk, that's a more manageable board state. I'm not saying I could win that, but with a Rashad board, I could tap down his manland. I do have the Pre-Saint Captain, which is essentially going to, just kill a wolf every turn, and then I do have the Deathblade Elite, which can end up killing the elves. Excuse me. So this one we get handily trounced. Really, definitely got owned by Abrupt Decay. That's one of the good things about like the 4-color blood deck is it really, when it works, it has the most efficient removal and threats available in the game. As you'll see, it's every color but blue. So I mean, it's an attacking deck. It just plays very efficient things. So let me go over this real fast. So I think we have a decently strong keep. We're on a two-lander, but we have a Weathered Wayfarer, which I thought, hey, it's going to be pretty good, because we'll be able to get our Dust Bowl, we'll be able to get our Wasteland, our Tech Edge, and really screw with his mana base. Because again, kind of like I was talking in the match that I had with Sensei on mid-range, I tend to think of their mana base as being far more important than mine. Mine is, frankly, if I have two planes, like I can cast almost all the relevant stuff in the deck. I mean, you want more than that for some stuff, but I mean, it's a it's a very efficient deck, so it doesn't really need the mana. But we see that he's on a relatively greedy keep, so he kept. This is me going through what I assumed to be his decision cycle on keeping of his hand. I think he treated this matchup more as like a white weenie matchup, like it's like, hey, they can't beat a 5/5. Well, it's 0/5 that attacks at a 5/5. And well, the Doran it's huge, just a monumental beating, just a big guy. We do have a game against it, but as soon as we see that come down, you know, I automatically like think to myself like, hey, I'm on the control. Like I have cards like Porcelain Legionnaire and like Hollow Spear Keeper Thalia, you know, whose power is all greater than their toughness. Like we can't really tango with this thing, but what we can do is present threats that we intend on chumping with while accruing incremental value in our Hallowed Spirit Keeper. So we as the aggro assume the control, I would say as early as, turn 3. As soon as we see Doran, we know that's really our pathway to victory, or we have to draw like something random like, Path to Exile, Oust, Declaration in Stone. Like if we had removal, like it would make it a lot easier too. He continues to brick on land drops though, which I think the 4-color blood decks, the good stuff value decks, are much more like they can't mull. I don't think they mull well. When you're dealing with a mana base that is as diverse and I don't want to say tricky because I mean like there's a science to building the mana base for it, but there's also a science to playing it, and I think you deal with a lot of hidden information when you go low on cards, specifically as it pertains to the fixing that you'll require over time, and in the assumption that you will draw it as needed. Whereas when you look at something like the deck we're playing, like, if I draw it off the top and it's a land, like it'll probably work. Like there's a few that don't, fix for color, but they tend to do other things that are even better. So that's just kind of like some thoughts on it. And like as you see, like he kept this hand that is very, very aggressive and tends to blank a lot of our creatures as far as, not the text on them per se, but the power and toughness. It's very difficult for us to get an aggressive start, even though this hand is very aggressive. So, as we continue to play here, you'll just see we trade off our creature resources to build value in the Hallowed Spirit Keeper, which we assume to be our win con in this game. We assume we're going to chump with it and then just throw 6 or 7 blockers at it. I think he grabs the wrong thing with Mesmeric Fiend there. So the Smuggler's Copter is a great card. I don't think it's per se great in this situation. So like I could like realistically like double or triple block with some cards to kill the Doran, involving the Smuggler's Copter, and then like kind of fix my draw with it from that block, but I lose it simultaneously. Plus I have to tap something else down, which makes it like even more challenging to get the right volume of blockers. So I think you wanted Hallowed Spirit Keeper there. We get very, very fortunate. So we draw our D-Ball, which is exactly what we needed because we can just punish his keep, which, was greedy. I mean, it just was. It was greedy. And I'm not blaming him. Like, everyone is prone to greedy keeps every now and then. Because, I mean, if you evaluate, Doran as being good against this deck that I'm playing, which I tend to think a lot of folks would think, and I think it is fine. Like, it'll beat, anything that I really field with the deck. I can't think of anything in the deck that actually, like, in a fair fight beats it. Although there are a lot of things that can get around it, like, for instance, Whip Quarter. As you can see, like, we trade off resources for a while with the Doran. I think there's a point in time at which, he wants to dial back his Rheostat for aggression, so that we cannot accrue value in our Hallowed Spirit Keeper, and I could be wrong. One other play that you look at that may be somewhat, questionable or you may question is is the attack with the Deathblade Elite. So Deathblade Elite, like one, a lot of people just question the value of that card in general. I don't. I think it's awesome. I think you saw it do some significant work here. We didn't provoke the Evanston's Pilgrim to take him off that extra mana, and my thinking kind of is, I want him to have to tap down attackers, and I also wanted the availability of Smuggler's Copter, really in this case, to find additional lands, because lands are really what's going to keep me going in this game. He can't really cast any of his high value spells. Like he can't cast removal very effectively right now. He really can't cast Planeswalkers, which is really what I'm trying to keep him off of. Like, and when I see that Dust Bowl, I'm like, hey, I think I want Smuggler's Copter. I can tap one of my little flyers, and I get in for more damage because it flies over, and it also gets me additional lands, which will make Dust Bowl more alive. As you can see, I mean, we draw a pretty even distribution, which I mean, this is not like I would say a land light deck. I mean, it's lighter than some. It's 36 lands, and some of them are like spell lands, but I don't think there's actually thinking off the top of my head, there's no lands in this deck that don't tap for mana. So we're not unfavored to be drawing lands anyways. I mean, it's going to be pretty much like every third card, which is C1 at this point. But I just think this last game was very interesting from the standpoint that we had to step back and even though we automatically go into most matchups, including like, especially including the mid-range matchup like this, assuming we are the aggro, and the fine line at which we needed to make the decision not to be the aggro and to go into an attritional or control role to buy time to accrue value in our card Hallowed Spirit Keeper was very fine. And I think I think because and dawts, I'm not like saying anything. I hope this doesn't come off as like bad, but I think we happened to pick up on it before our opponent did. And I think there were ways they could have played around it, and it would have involved attacking a lot less with Doran. But if the Hallowed Spirit Keeper's not dead and Doran's not tapped, I really don't have attacks. I mean, and yeah, you can see now that like with the Whip Quarter, yes, eventually I would have had attacks. But at the point in time that information was not hidden anymore, which would have been upon the resolution of the Mesmeric Fiend, you know, we didn't see a change in how the game was played. And I think, you almost want to dial back because I'm essentially trying to use your momentum against you in this game to get that value. And it ended up working out very well. I don't, like I said, I don't think this is a matchup I'm like overall favored in. However, I think, over enough time, you'll see that decks like 4-color blood or 4CBlood, will have a greater tendency than something as simple as Death and Taxes to beat themselves just because of the mana base. So interesting match, and it really, because of this last round right here, this last game right here, I wanted to throw this one up because I think it's interesting food for thought and like, understanding where that decision cycle happens and how if, and this is perceived by me, I don't mean anything bad by it, but how if one player, makes that determination correctly before the other does, it can generally tend to spell victory. So I hope you enjoyed this session. I won't give you my normal spiel. This is Hunter Card Singleton, and hopefully if you're watching it, we'll see you tomorrow on Saturday. All right, have a good night now. Happy